Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Wave of Change. Today, I'm really excited to say that I've got a great guest, the one and only, the Dean of Big Data, Bill Schmarzo. Bill, how you doing?
Hey, T-Man, I'm doing great, and thanks for having me on.
Hey, this is fantastic. Always love chatting with you. So it's been a while, so it's great to get back on the horn. Lots of great ground to cover. First of all, Bill is well known on the internet as the Dean of Big Data in data science. I've learned a tremendous amount from him. He's certainly got some great scope and quite the colorful character. He's also the CTO of Hitachi Vantara Global. So he's certainly out there working in the line and doing some interesting things in the landscape of emerging tech, artificial intelligence, analytics, automation, IoT. So we've got a lot of great ground to cover. And Bill, just like with the other guests that I have on the show, what I'd like to do is just get you to start off with a little better introduction about yourself. And let's tell the viewers where, a memory of when you first got interested in technology, something that tweaked your interest.
Well, T-Man, I think the first time I really got infatuated with computers was when I got a programmable TI calculator, and you could actually program it to do stuff. You could do really very basic sort of charting sort of things. And I was blown away by the ability to program. I thought it was so cool that you could tell this machine what to do, and it would go ahead and do it. And my roommate used to jokingly say that you can't leave that thing on overnight when you're sleeping, because when you wake up, it'll probably take over the world. So, of course, back then it wasn't really true, but it was the whole idea that you could take and program something really tweaked my interest in the whole area of programming. So that was sort of my first aha moment with, wow, this technology is pretty cool and pretty powerful.
Awesome. That's a great story. It's always interesting to see how people, what they remember about technology. It sure has changed a tremendous amount since we first started looking at it, right?
Yeah.
It's been some of evolution there. And on that ground, like, you work in some pretty exciting space and some pretty innovative space. So, a main theme and kind of a momentum of this series is really all about emerging tech. What kind of impact it is having, like where it is leapfrogging, where it's really impacting process or change, or really requiring, organizations to almost take a hammer and smash down things and restart, right?
Yep.
And you've certainly given me some great dialogue, previous conversations, and really I'm looking to showcase that. And where I thought this being the first episode of 2020 and coming out there, right,
Yep.
is to look at really the decade of data enablement, right? Kind of put that theme out there, and certainly would love to get your perspective on that, being the dean and all, right? Just really love to get your insights on organizations that are succeeding with it. What are they doing right, and where you see pitfalls?
Yeah, T-Man, I think it all starts by actually moving away from this idea of data enablement or data driven. Too much fixation on data and not enough fixation and framing around value. I think where I see organizations making the biggest strides is when they change the conversation about talking about data. And because, data just lays there. Data, in essence, really has little value in of itself. It's a latent sort of value. And it's only when you apply some advanced analytics to it around a particular problem area that you actually can start deriving new sources of customer, product, and operational value. So one of the first conversations I have with customers is, don't become data driven, become value driven. Focus on how you're going to try to drive value. And when you do that, that also allows you to broaden the conversation beyond just IT. IT itself can't be value driven. They have to collaborate with the business areas that are the sources of value creation: sales, marketing, product development, customer service, whatever it might be. It forces this collaboration across the organization where we're going to drive value and we're going to use our data to drive that value. But the real value conversation must start with the business. And so to me, when you start changing, I like to say, if you want to change the game, change the frame. And the first thing you do is let's start talking about data. Let's get off of that, because data in of itself doesn't have much value unless you start applying stuff to it. So that to me is sort of the big aha moment. You get organizations starting to think about how do I create new sources of value with data versus leading with data and trying to hope that they can somehow find value based on the data.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. So organizations that are succeeding with that, I'd be curious from an industry perspective. I'm sure you see a lot in manufacturing. I'd be curious in other industries where you do see some adoption, where they are, looking to add value, looking to enhance things, or even looking to automate and let machines take over, right? What kind of things are you seeing, in industry that are really leapfrogging, right? Where they're really challenging the way things were done, and, they're starting to look more to technology to make decisions and to, do things that might be a little out of a comfort zone from our traditional way of dealing with process technology.
This conversation has to be driven by the CIO, because the business stakeholders are looking to the CIO to be that person. But they don't want a passive CIO who just sits back and sort of, creates a data lake and opens the doors and say, here, go forward and be fruitful. The executives are tired of the CIO who's passive. They want a proactive CIO, somebody who is actively involved in the business, understanding the business and working with the business to figure out how can I leverage data and analytics to create new sources of value. So it all starts with the CIO. And so it's almost regardless of an industry, it has everything to do with the CIO and their mindset and their ability to think outside the box, to become much more proactive and progressive in working with the business to try to drive value. One of the fallacies I hear in this space is, well, you got to go sell this to the business. Well, the business doesn't understand the data, doesn't understand the underlying technologies. They understand where value is created, so they're a very important component to this process, but they're not the enablers of value. They are the sources of value, but the enablers of value are going to be the CIO. So in organizations where I see them making this big leap forward, it's almost always driven by a CIO who's had the epiphany and says, I want to be more than just a cost center. I want to be a profit center. I want to drive profit. I want to be able to sit in on the mahogany row. I want to be at the table with all the CXOs to be showing them where and how they can apply data and analytics to drive new value. So it's a CIO-led conversation. Now let me riff further on this. Most CIOs don't get it. Most of them don't, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that many CIOs rose to power based on the fact that they survived an SAP ERP implementation, right? They survived it. They spent $20 million on the services, another 60 to 80 on the, or 20 million on the software and 60 to 80 on the software, and it was a multi-year process, and it took forever to get there, and millions of lives were lost on the process, and at the end, something squirts out at the end that doesn't match at all what they thought, but by golly, mission accomplished, we're done. And so they're just hanging on for dear life. Some of these CIOs are just hanging on until retirement. I have no time for them. I want the CIO who's saying, we need to do something different. And by the way, it's very rewarding for me as a CIO to be that instrument of change, that catalyst. So long riff on the CIO, because they are critical in this process. And to be honest with you, most of them are not up to the challenge.
Yeah, and I've heard that too, and certainly you've shared that before and see that as well, right? So one thing that I know we chatted about before, and I'd be curious, just what you are seeing out there is, when you look at a CIO that is having some success and they are looking to leverage, data analysis and data science and getting some better machine learning, and they're looking to really automate some things and put some processes into place where you're going to let machines take over, and it's a big leap, right?
Yep.
In looking at that, I know that there's two paradigms. One that's more traditional, where you have like a more centralized approach, right?
Yep.
Where you have a centralized data scientist who then is kind of working with everybody, and they're the center of knowledge, right? And the problem with that is they get, they win the lottery or something good or bad, whatever happens, they're gone. You lose all that, right? And one thing that you had mentioned before that really stuck with me is the wolf pack mentality, right? Where you kind of divide and conquer that out and really have a better broad base of design. I'd be curious from your experience, how you've seen that roll out with successful, organizations that have that innovative CIO, and what things that you've really kind of gleaned from that other organizations could certainly gain some knowledge from.
The wolf pack mentality and the idea behind the wolf pack versus the bear is it's hard to find that single person who knows everything to the point where they can actually deliver a viable, meaningful solution by themselves. That you're better off to attack with a wolf pack, a consortium of cohorts who all bring different skill sets, but it's that collaboration across that wolf pack that brings unique perspectives that allows you to deliver something that's meaningful and relevant to the business. There's a couple of key aspects about this. The wolf pack aspect is that, number one, the people with the best insights are the people closest to the customers or the operation of the business. They're not on mahogany row. This is one of those aha moments that senior executives don't like. That your senior vice president of marketing, your senior vice president of sales, and your senior vice president of operations don't know nearly as much about the operation of the business as the people who are at the front lines, the boots on the ground. And so the wolf pack mentality is about how do you bring those people into the process? Because not only are they a valuable source of insights around which to drive your data science work, but ultimately they're the ones who are going to have to adopt this, right? Who are going to actually make this work. You made an interesting comment, team, and you said, letting machines take over. That is the promise of what we're going to do. And by the way, we've done this already, right? Do you hand calculate square root, T-Man?
No. Yeah.
No,
Exactly. Yeah.
Calculator took over square root calculations many, many moons ago for me, right?
Yeah.
And so as humans, we know that machines are going to take over because they do certain things better than we do. But that frees us up to do other things. And so the idea of you bringing the wolf pack approach in, you amass a group of people, very diverse, conflicting objectives together to try to resolve this, brings together the best ideas at a point where you can actually then come up with a better solution that really is meaningful and is actually used in the field.
Yeah, this is where I really see the hammer coming out, and from conversations we've had and blogs I've read of yours, right, is when you look at the interdepartmental, real collaboration, not just FaceTime, not just talk, right?
Yeah.
Where you actually do press and look at what those outcomes want to be, right? And you look at what kind of value you're going to drive, and you're looking at how you're going to make all these things happen. And it's not until you have some of that uncomfortable push back and forth, right, where you actually see some good gain. That's kind of what I've gained from you.
Yeah, diversity of opinions is critical. If you don't have diversity, if you don't have conflicting objectives, you don't have innovation. And I think one of the blogs I wrote about recently talked about how, when I grew up in the 70s, you had a choice. You either had a car that was very efficient from a mileage, perspective, or you had a car that was very fast from a horsepower perspective. And you had one or the other. Right, either you got great miles from a car that barely ran fast, or I had a 68 Plymouth Fury 3 that, I might have just poured the gas out the window.
Oh, I bet you it went nice, though.
Yeah, just right. And so at some point in time, this efficient or fast conversation turned into an efficient and fast conversation. And nowadays, it unleashed all kinds of innovation and, high compression engines and turbochargers and, lightweight alloys and all kinds of things were done. That point of conflict of throwing out there on the table fast and efficient forced the organizations, all these automotive companies, to really challenge it. And now we do have cars that have high fuel efficiency and high horsepower. They go like bats out of hell, right? And so that is important, right? It's the heart of what organizations can do to change their economic value curve. And the economic value curve is really, it's a mechanism where you measure the trade-off you have between variables. And at some point in time, if you don't transform your economic value curve, you know I was going to talk economics at some time, didn't you, T-Man? So
Oh yeah, yeah. I was waiting for it. Yeah, yeah.
if you don't transform your economic value curve, at some point in time, you run into the law of diminishing returns, right? That the more you spend, the less you're getting back for it. The way to do that is you embrace conflict. You try to do more with less, and you take that economic value curve and you move it up so you can actually get more output with less input. That's the power of conflict. And so as a country, as a company, as people, we don't want to avoid conflict. You want to embrace conflict and listen to the other side and figure out, how do we make things better? How do we take 1 + 1 = 700 versus 1 + 1 = 1.5?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the things we touched on, was the CIO role, the importance of that. Where there are some pitfalls that you see out there with, maybe not having the complete skill set. What are 3 things that you think a CIO can do to focus, and an organization can do to focus more on really, how do we better do, data management, and how do we do better data analysis, data science, data analytics, right? How are we going to look to leverage some of these things more effectively? But I think a lot of organizations are challenged, and CIOs are in a position that they're throwing technology at something just for the sense of throwing technology in it because it's the latest and greatest. What are 3 real things that you think could, an organization and CIO do to really pinpoint and focus?
Well, I didn't realize this was going to be a test. So I got to think. So I was just taking some notes. So there's the 3 things that jump to mind. First off, the CIO has to invest time to understand what and how these technologies can do, what they can do, right, and how they do it. You don't need to write and create a deep learning program. You're not going to be asked to write a recurrent neural network. You should understand what it does. You should understand some basic concepts, such as back propagation and stochastic gradient descent, and some really fundamental things about, well, how do these things work? How does a neural network learn, right? So I think the CIO has to invest time to understand how things work. Because you don't know how it works, you don't know how to use it. So that's number 1. Building on that is, once you understand how things work, now you can start a process of identifying where and how I could leverage that to drive value. So now I take this basic understanding of what the technology can do. Now I can start to figure out where and how I can use that to drive value. Right. So, and value is not created by the CIO, it's created by the business, which necessitates number 3, which is you have to drive collaboration. You have to be able to reach out to the organization. You have to have a process that is a fail fast, learn faster kind of mentality, where you're going to take these technologies, you're going to target a problem area, you're going to test out things really quickly. And that whole data science mentality of failing fast and learning faster becomes so critical to the process. And so I think understanding what the technology can do, first off. Number 2, understanding where and how I leverage that to drive value. And number 3, building an environment where you can leverage this collaboration to try and learn. I've said several times, T-Man, and several of my blogs, that the economies of learning are more powerful than economies of scale in a digital economy. That is the ability to learn things more quickly and propagate that back across the organization is how organizations are going to win, because the world is constantly changing. We had an internal conversation where somebody was saying, well, I have digital transformation fatigue. And I said, bullshit. You need to build digital transformation muscle, because digital transformation is what you're going to be living every day. To think it's going to happen for just a small period and then things are going to settle down, that may have been the 1950s and 60s, but it's not what this world's about. Right? Everything's in constant change. Our customers are changing, technology is changing, the economy is changing, right? Everything is changing every day. So if you're suffering from digital transformation fatigue, you have the wrong mindset. You need to build muscle where digital transformation is a constant, and you're leveraging all these technologies, leveraging this focus on value to build the skills so that you can learn and disseminate that learning more quickly than others.
That's so well said. And it really ties into, I'd be curious your perspective. It really ties into this whole notion that with a lot of this emerging technology evolving so quickly, we don't even know what capabilities are going to be available with it in 3 to 5 years, even 2 years, right? So
Yep.
you're constantly in a lot, in a flux of, you've got to, enable this, you've got to make this happen, you've got to drive value, but how do you pull it all together when it's changing so rapidly, right?
Let me throw an idea at you, T-Man, one that I've discussed with a few customers, and it makes them uneasy. By the way, my job when I talk to customers is to walk in, and I want them to dread, oh my God, here comes Schmarzo, right? He's going to say something that's going to make me very uncomfortable. And one of the things I like to postulate with my clients is, what if technology was disposable? That is, if you were using some set of technology and you could easily get rid of it to move to something else, but you could retain all the value that you got from that technology and transfer it to the next one. Wouldn't life be easier? And they're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I said, well, why don't we treat things that way, right? We get caught up with buying technologies and we forget the fact that once you've bought it, it's a sunk cost. Right? Who cares how much you paid for it? Now, what you want to focus in on then is not the technology, but the value you're driving from that technology. And that value more and more for digital companies is taking the form of either data, right? If I'm getting lots of data from that technology, that's great. If I go to different technology and get more data, that's great, but it gives me data. And in some cases, it actually gives me analytic insights, some learning, some propensities that I can do. Right? Those are the things of the value. The technology itself, I should be willing to throw it away. If a new technology comes along and has a way to take the data and the analytics that I've been capturing and nurturing and maturing, then throw that crap away and go on something else. I mean, we just can't seem to let go of technology. And it's holding back so many organizations.
Yeah, especially with so many, like such a huge shift in technology in the landscape with cloud adoption and easy rollout. And, even if you look at the edge stuff, like it's pretty low cost stuff they're rolling out. Even if it was to flip in 3 years, who cares, right?
Right.
It's peanuts.
If you go with a cloud solution, which is really attractive way to go, make sure it's easy to get your data back out of it.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. Yeah.
So many of those cloud vendors know that.
Don't get the handcuffs. Yeah.
You want your data? Oh, that's going to cost a lot more.
Yeah, and I think that's where you're going to see a force in the industry for more open and accessible. And you're already seeing it in public cloud. Who would have ever thought Oracle and Microsoft would be working together so close, right? Like
exactly.
Like that just goes to show you the power of public cloud. Now,
cats and dogs sleeping together. I mean, what's going on with this world?
Oh yeah, exactly. So I think so those are 3 great points. I have another great point, and you can point people where to get this. How to get people thinking like a data scientist. I think you kind of had a book on that title, didn't you?
That's an interesting concept. I
should
run with that.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, the thinking like a data scientist at its heart is very simple, which is how do you enable the people who are closest to the business to feel comfortable with ideating? How do you get them to feel liberated? How do you unleash that pent-up knowledge they've got so that you can bring that into the fold and your data science team can use that to come up with better solutions and better results? I made the comment earlier that the operational knowledge is not in Mahogany Row anymore. It's not with the VP level people. It's with the technicians, the nurses, the clerks, the people on the ground working with customers or working with the operations. They know what's going on. And so I actually think this is a really important trend for AI, that AI, in order for AI to be successful, we have to empower those people, not the executives. It's those people who have these insights about how things work. And if you can leverage AI with them and have the machines do some of their thinking for them, then those people are free to do even more things, to spend more time on customer service, spend more time on maintenance of the equipment, and to do all the kinds of things you really want those people to do. So the thinking like a data scientist process is really a mentality. It's got a bunch of steps, right? But it's an agile kind of a collaborative framework for how you bring people together to brainstorm those ideas, those variables, those metrics that might be better predictors of performance.
It's a great quick read. It certainly is. Certainly a high value. Where can where can listeners find that?
So if you go to my website, deanofbigdata.com, it's there as an ebook. I haven't made it physically available. I made it available as an ebook. And the reason why I did it as an ebook is I wanted to keep the price down. So I have a lot of students that want the books, and charging them $50 for a book seemed ridiculous. So this book I think is $15. It's pretty easy for anybody to consume. If you want to have a hard copy, go to the FedEx store or someplace, and Kinko's are printed off there. But I've made it available as an ebook. It's designed as a workbook, so it lays out flat. It is a workbook. It's a book that's going to ask you questions and ask you to go through the process. And so I hope I've gotten a lot of good feedback on it. My students really.
Oh, it's a great workbook. It really is. I've learned so much from it, and certainly reference it. Yeah.
It's simple too. The
Yeah.
concepts in there are simple, and it gives you kind of a framework how to think about unleashing this pent up, innovative, creative thinking in the organization.
And so good all across the organization, just to go through that and think a little further and take some of the mystique out of this whole AI and what is this? Because you made the point that machines have been doing stuff for us for a long time. They fly planes, right? So there really is really just more getting familiar with what does that mean to me now at my day to day, right?
Yeah, it's inevitable the machines are going to take over more and more of the tasks that we do. I haven't hand washed clothes in like forever, right? A machine washes my clothes. A machine washes my dishes. A machine keeps my food cold. A machine cooks my food for me. So I'm not building a fire in the backyard cooking stuff. So why should this be any different? Have machines, drive me around. Have machines, mowing my yard. And I mean, it's just logical. And so part of this is to create a mindset where people understand that, hey, this is easy to understand, but it isn't going to actually replace the creative part of what I do. It's going to actually liberate what I've got in my head and allow me to do more interesting, more challenging, and hopefully more fun things.
Cool. Yeah, no, exactly. That's what I think too, right? Another thing that I was just chatting with you today earlier before we started recording, and I have to bring up, I noticed in a Twitter thread this morning, a really great post, and I'm like, what is going on here? So let's talk a little bit about this. The Adventures. Okay, wait, I better get my radio voice on for this. Okay. The Adventures of Bucko Schmarzo across the 8 dimensions of digital transformation. What, pray tell, is this all about? Do tell.
So I have struggled for a long time to frame up my 4th book, which is really, I've called it, Economics, Design Thinking, or the Economics of Data Analytics and Digital Transformation. That's the name of the book, right? And so it's the idea behind this is to bring together a lot of the different concepts I've worked, to put worksheets around it. Of course, I'm a very worksheet kind of guy, so I can use it in class. And I've struggled with how do these things all come together. And I have things on my wall with posters and things trying to tie things together. And people say, well, think about it from a story perspective. Tell a story. Don't just have a bunch of items, one-off kind of things. How does it tell a story? And so I was thinking about, God, how do you tell a story? I mean, I guess I'm a decent storyteller, but that's just something you just do, right? I don't have any idea. So I was thinking about this, and it just came to me, well, why not create a comic book? Why not frame out what I want to write in this book as a comic book, right? And I start off by taking a book, chapter on the page of Buckaroo Banzai, right, which is a great movie, and it's gonna transform a bit. But how do I create a comic book that sort of depicts the story that Buckaroo Schmarzo and his sidekick Val have to go through in order to drive digital transformation? What are all the different components you need to consider, and how do I do it in a way that's kind of fun? So I've been working on that the last couple of days. It's hard because comic book doesn't translate to a Word document easily, and that you can post on like LinkedIn or Data Science Central or KD Nuggets. So
But
it's
boy, do I sure want to see it. Like, I mean, I got to tell you.
it's going to end up being well, we're going to figure out what it is, but it's probably going to be a PowerPoint that's so images in a Word document that it won't be very interactive, but it at least, if
That's
nothing
just the
else,
first iteration. We'll get it to full interaction, right?
there we go. We'll animate it. I'll outsource to Disney and Pixar to have it turn into a cartoon or a movie, and life will be good. So anyway, a short story long is that I needed something to fuel my creative thinking about how I frame this. And the idea of a comic book and the going through this comic book seemed like a fun idea. We'll see if it plays out or not. I'm going to follow it through as far as I get, and if it works halfway decent, well, watch the Twitter feeds for it, huh?
Oh, I'll be watching for that one. I got a kick. I always get a kick out of you, so I always got to pay attention.
But T-Man, if we can't have fun at what we do, then we should be doing something different.
I agreed. Totally agreed. That's fantastic. Well, this has been such a great chat today. What I'd like to do in just the last few minutes here is, being that we're on the 2020, and beyond, what from that perspective, from this kickoff of this next decade, where do you see the big push in the next evolution? Are things happening where there is that real leap with technology from what you're working with?
So there's a couple of things, T-Man, that are really very provocative. And they're really being driven in many cases by AI and a realization that data has value from an economics perspective, much more so than it does from an accounting perspective. You and I have talked about this before. I'll go to the second point first, right? That trying to value data from an accounting perspective doesn't work, because accounting is a value in exchange measurement technique. And so the value of your data is worth, on your books, what someone's willing to pay you for it. And there aren't any ready marketplaces out there, and there shouldn't be, I'd argue. But if we look at it from an economics perspective, in value in use, that is, what kind of value can I get from my data and using it to solve problems around customer retention or customer acquisition or cross-sell, upsell, or fraud or money, whatever the problems you're going after, that data, all of a sudden, the value of that data jumps dramatically. And very, very few organizations have clicked on this point of, if you look at it not from an accounting perspective, from an economics perspective, it's like, oh, I get it. Right. And so it changes everything you do about how you prioritize your data, how you govern it, how you manage it, how you enhance it and refine it, all these sort of important things. So that economic value of data thing is important, but it's struggled to grab roots. And I think what's happened is AI is going to highlight this economic value of data in ways that we have never thought about before. And the one thing I'm really interested in right now is if I think about my data science maturity process, I want to go from predictive to prescriptive to automate and eventually to autonomous. Now think about the power. Elon Musk made a statement that he believes that the value of the Tesla you buy will be greater in the future than it is now, that you are buying an asset that appreciates in value. And I thought,
that's real staggering. Yeah, it is.
It is a staggering statement. You think about, I'm buying it, the Prius you're buying is going to be worth more in the future than it is now. Why is that? Because the more it gets used, the more across the 400,000 Teslas that get used, the common intelligence, the intelligence across that entire community improves, right? It gets more reliable, it gets more dependable, it gets safer, right? All the different aspects of that car gets better. And so that is a concept that, again, an accounting concept is you buy an asset and you start to depreciate it and it comes off your books. This idea that it appreciates in value is not an accounting. It's this economics approach. And so that's why I find economics is such an important, powerful idea here, is that I think it's the economics that drives the economies of learning, and why the economies of learning are so much more powerful than economies of scale, because across all these devices I can learn, and it becomes a race. Elon Musk is betting that he can learn faster than anybody else out there from his cars. I love that challenge.
It's quite intriguing. It really is. When you first posted that, it really had me thinking, like, And then I put it out there, and a lot of people are like, oh no, that's an asset that rolls down the street, that thing's depreciating never. And that's where they just don't see the intellectual value side of it that it's gaining, right?
You gotta change your frame. That's the problem. We talked about the challenge for the CIO, right? The challenge of the CIO is not that they're not smart. They're very smart. They're very influential, but they got the wrong frame. They have a big bang SAP ERP frame. No. It's about increment fast, learn faster, disseminate learning. The economies of learning are more powerful than economies of scale. That's a staggering concept out there. And so few people get it. However, the ones that do get it, the Googles of the world, the Teslas of the world, the Apples of the world, this is the reason why they're dominating the marketplace. Because
they're kings, yeah.
Different frame. And so
yeah.
Any organization of any size can change the frame. You don't need to spend $20 million to change your frame. You don't need to bring in senior management consultants to change your frame. It's just up to you to take the time, pause, and to think differently, to embrace the potential of thinking differently about how I approach this. Don't pave the cow path with technology. Instead, let's think differently about how I use this technology and change the frame around how I'm driving my value creation processes.
That is fantastic. And so many great points today for the listeners. Certainly value, drive value. I love this line, you got to change the game, change the frame, right? Like you really got to reframe things, that focus on forced collaboration and that CIO development. I think those are all fantastic points. And again, Bill, always a pleasure, and certainly look forward to future chats, and really appreciate your time.
Thanks, T-Man. Whenever you want me on, you just drop me a line and I'll be on. These are great conversations. I love them because the way you frame the questions forces me to think through how I'm going to do things. And so now I'm going to get back to writing my comic book.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to the comic book. And thanks again, everyone. That's another edition of the podcast. And certainly stay tuned for more. You'll see them come out. Thank you.